Okay, this is lesson 21 in a series of lectures on how the USA is starting a new Cold War with Russia. And a big part of this manufacturing a new Cold War is the bogus manufactured perception that Russia is intent on aggressively expanding to the West, conquering European nations to rebuild its glorious old Russian Empire days. Alright? And we've been showing how Russia's military capacity is not capable of that. The first thing we did is we examined Russia's wars against Chechnya, problems it had there, and then the second was the problems it had in beating Georgia. All right. Now we're going to focus on Russian military material readiness. All right. And I want to start with introducing something I teach in my sociology class. In the very first lesson, I teach conflict theory. And in this, I say that about half of all military strategy comes down to effective control and utilization of resources. And that's explained in this diagram here. There's two types of resources, human resources and material resources, all right? We're going to focus on material here today, but I'll first introduce human. So, human resources in the military, of course, requires recruiting, getting good talent. Then you got to train these guys. You have to have a good training program. Then you have to instill discipline. But a key factor is morale, because this is your underlying will to fight. This is what drives military force here. And there's many factors that feed into this. Things like small unit cohesion, the idea that soldiers fight for the guy, their buddies next to them. Regimental esprit, big part of attitude, right? Determines how effective a group is. For example, Marine Corps as a whole are a very effective fighting force, right? And that's largely due to regimental esprit. Detonator, or you're attacked. So either a bogus detonator or a real attack, right? Either way, you create an incident, and you feel, and if they feel like they're attacked, that increases will to fight. And then, of course, propaganda, nationalism, which has been used to manipulate populations in a war for a long time. Just feed people their egos and they'll fight. Fear-mongering always works. Hate, xenophobia always work. Okay, those are the types of things that increase morale. And you control your human resources. Now, on the material side, one thing you got is weapons design, weapons production, transportation capacity, which lends into logistics, all right, supply lines. All right, Eisenhower was a guy that was, hot on logistics, and secure lines of communication for your logistics. All right, so first thing I want to discuss is after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, after they fell in '91, quote, the Russian defense industrial base essentially fell apart, along with the rest of society. Well, that was during Boris Yeltsin's time. All right, they've come back a good bit now. Currently, Russia's military industry falls well short of West in terms of technology, smart weapons, targeting pods, and active electronically scanned phased array radars. That's a new type of radar here. Far more effective than the old rotating types. I'm not going to explain this, but basically, these shoot out highly concentrated, powerful pencil beams of energy that scan the whole sky, instead of like a broad swath of just throwing out energy in a wide cone. All right. Anyways, these are far more effective. I'm not going to explain all the details. Russia no longer has the shipyard capacity to build large capital surface ships, and it uses antiquated construction techniques even today. When Russia's only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, deploys, it belches copious smoke and has to take along with it a tugboat due to a high rate of breakdowns in the open seas. I mean, how embarrassing is that? According to a Royal Navy source, quote, we have had people on board Russian ships in the last 10 years or so, and it's always a bit of a shock. The conditions inside are pretty manky. All their ships look shiny on the outside, but are pretty hard on the inside. Capital naval ships lack anti-submarine and anti-air escort vessels. All right, and this requires them to overload on multiple weapon systems, requiring multiple sensors and multiple operators, creating a high likelihood that a combined enemy attack would overwhelm the ship's combat information center, leaving gaps in their defensive capabilities. They have no defense in depth. For example, when a U.S. aircraft carrier deploys, it deploys with a whole carrier battle group. It'll take along with it a whole bunch of cruisers, a whole bunch of destroyers, a whole bunch of frigates, and submarines, along with supply ships for fuel and for food. Alright, so they lack that capability. Okay. So Russia's fleet consists of Soviet leftovers that are outdated, prone to mechanical breakdowns, and wickedly uncomfortable for the crews, and rarely set sail. They normally stay in port. There's also a high rate of shipboard fires in the Russian Navy. Now, Russia is building some new ships, but it's small quantities of their smaller ships. They lack shipyard capacity to build large capital ships. So they're not going to be able to build another aircraft carrier. Right? Currently, they're building a few frigates, a few corvettes, and corvettes are basically glorified patrol boats, or a little bit larger than patrol boats. And they built a couple of amphib ships, multi-purpose amphibious ships. All right, not as good as ships like this. This is a U.S. LHA. They're building more of like a LPH type of ship. And then one example is their lighter class destroyer. They designed and planned to build a class of destroyer, which is larger than a frigate or corvette. However, they had to cancel due to lack of money, fiscal shortages. So here's their one and only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kudzenov, whatever, right? Must have been sitting at anchor or something like that, or just sitting there, because it's not belching smoke, right? It belches smoke when it's underway, and they gotta bring along with it a tugboat, because it breaks down a lot underway. Now compare that to American supercarriers here, right? This is a Ford-class carrier, brand new one. So let me read this. Not only does Russia's only aircraft carrier break down often, it can only carry 24 fixed-wing aircraft, launched without catapults. And see, it's got a jump jet here. It's a ramp that shoots up, right? That's how they launch. They get it going, right? No catapults, so it's all aircraft-powered propulsion here, all right? And because of this, it's limited in its takeoff weight, so they're limited in their payload capacity, how much weapons they can carry, right? And they have a low launch rate. They can only launch one at a time, right? All right, now the U.S., on the other hand, has 11 supercarriers, 10 Nimitz, and 1 Ford now. There's another 4 Ford-class carriers under construction or on order. And each of these can carry 90 aircraft, roughly 4 times more aircraft than each of these. So every one of these, and there's 11 of these, carries 4 times more aircraft than Admiral Kudzenov, right? All right. And in addition to that, the U.S. has 16 multi-purpose amphibious aircraft carriers. They look like this, right? These are LHAs here. They can carry helicopters or F-35s. Here's F-35s, and these are Ospreys. They're like vertical takeoff. They're kind of like a cross between helicopter and propeller airplane. All right. So the combined total is 27 to 1. 27 plus 4, but I say possibly minus 4, because I'm willing to bet that as they introduce each new Ford class, they're going to retire one of the Nimitz class, right? But it's still a 27 to 1 ratio, right? And then you got to look at this, right? The whole idea is Russia trying to remake its empire. To do that, it's got to go against NATO nations. For example, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia are all part of NATO, right? It's got to take those. Right? If it takes those, well, you're going against the combined naval forces. And Russia's highly vulnerable on the open seas. Right? We said that Russia is a landlocked nation except for 3 water routes. Their Murmansk route, their St. Petersburg route here, and the Black Sea route here. And each of these are very susceptible to being cut off. With the Greenland-UK Iceland Gap, with Skagerrak Cataract Straits, with the Bosphorus Dardanelles down here. Easily cut off, right? With far superior NATO forces. So, I mean, not only does U.S. have far superior NATO force, you gotta add on top of that NATO forces. Britain's got carriers. France has carriers. I don't know if Italy has a carrier or not. I may, right? But a lot of these nations have submarines and other warships, right? Okay, so here is an article from the Business Insider. They talk about 5 ways Russia's military is falling apart. 1. Planes falling out of the sky, right? They have a high rate of mechanical failure in the sky where planes fall out of the sky, including their latest fighter plane, the Su-57. All right, they only have 2 of them, and one of them crashed already. I believe it was like December or so of 2019. All right. Their only carrier needs a tug when it goes to sea and cannot launch fully armed airplanes. All right, it has to launch them with low payload because it's not catapult launch. U.S. ships have 4 catapults. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Heavy reliance on conscripts and soldiers forced into contracts. Right. Roughly 75% of their armed forces are conscript soldiers, drafted soldiers, who do not want to be there. These guys are in there only for a year because they won't stand it any longer, or if they agree to a contract, they serve for 2 years. I'm not sure what advantage there is for that. Maybe they get better pay. Failures during power display parades. So during their big parades in front of Moscow, right in front of the Kremlin, right, stuff breaks down. Tanks break down, trucks break down, missile carriers break down, whatever. Get out the tow truck. How embarrassing is that? Their funding situation is bad and getting worse. And for example, remember I showed you the overall funding of Russia compared to the United States? I mean, this is a drop in a bucket. U.S. spends more than the next 9 nations combined. Here's China, here's Great Britain, here's Japan, here's Saudi Arabia. Oh, behind Saudi Arabia is Russia. Then you got Germany, India, France, and Brazil, rounding up the top 10. Right? And another thing is your overall capacity to fund your military is based upon your GDP, the size of your economy. Right? If you look at GDP for this is 2017. Okay. So USA was 19.7. I think this was 2019, maybe. Maybe it's 17. Okay. And then Russia's down here 12. So yeah, USA, China, Japan, Germany, Britain, India, France, Brazil, Italy, Canada. South Korea is ahead of Russia in GDP. Bigger economy than Russia is South Korea, right? Russia falls behind California. So Russia's GDP is 1.5 trillion. California's GDP is 3.2 trillion. California alone is over twice the size of the Russian economy. I mean, come on. All right, how is this going to be attacked? Oh, make a joke, right? Don't look at the facts. Make a joke. Oh, he's a fool. That'll work. Right? Aggressive humor works I've taught it thousands of times. It still works. What's the purpose of it? An ad hominem attack on credibility. I've taught that thousands of times, and it still works. And they'll make it into a big wave in social reality, which I've taught thousands of times. Still works every time. And that's going to be the sum total of the reality. A joke. A mocking joke. Right? Now, during the Georgian Chechen wars, their tanks were in disrepair, broke down frequently, and they lack reactive armor, and thus highly vulnerable to primitive shoulder-fired anti-armor weapons. You know, just rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs. The explosives and reactive armor were pilfered for sale. Roughly half of Russian tanks are the old T-62s and T-72s, basically 1960s and 70s era. T-80s have a lot of problems. This is their most plentiful modern tank here. And they have about 519 T-90s, which are basically upgraded versions of the T-72. The majority of Russian forces currently fighting in Syria are using 1970s hardware. They have aircraft problems. So, quote, the Russian Air Force, for example, is buying small numbers of modern combat aircraft built in boutique-sized batches, right? The country is building Su-30M2s, Su-30SMs, Su-35Ss, and Su-34s, which are all derivatives of the same basic Su-27 flanker airframe, but don't share a lot of parts commonality, and that complicates maintenance and repair logistics. It's also buying MiG-29 derivatives, for example, the MiG-35, which add to the problem. Russia is also starting to develop at least 3 new types of aircraft, but it's not clear how they will pay for such expensive programs, unquote. Right? Now, you know, one of the reasons why they renamed the numbers here is, right, they want to create the impression that it's a whole new, brand new aircraft to increase foreign export sales, right? But it's still just, this is just a worked over, you know, a little bit improved MiG-29. These are all improved versions of the MiG or Su-27, right? All right. And they're going to have problems keeping them in the air because there's very little parts commonality between these. In early 2006, Russia integrated its aviation companies into a single state-owned holding called the United Aviation Building Corporation, UAC, which has proven to be a failure, incapable of innovation and adaptation. An example is Russia's failed attempt at a 5th-generation stealth fighter, the Su-57, whose production suffered cost overruns and design and development problems, including questionable stealth, especially from behind with its 2-dimensional thrust vector nozzles, which are not stealth. I mean, it's just going to, you know, light up radars from behind. In fact, the Su-57, here's an Su-57, was being developed in partnership with India, but in 2018, India abandoned the project. They pulled out because the Fu-57 proved not to meet requirements for stealth, combat avionics, radars, and sensors. Currently, Russia only has 2 Su-57s, one of which crashed last year. However, in 2019, Putin announced an order for 76 Su-57s to be delivered by 2028. So here's a note. The U.S. Air Force F-15 has a kill ratio of 104-0, mostly against Russian aircraft. Only a few of these were like French F-1 Mirage aircraft. Right? The vast majority were all Soviet aircraft, Russian aircraft, and the F-15 has a 104-0 kill ratio. Right? That's infinite. I mean, you know, that's an exaggeration to say it, but it's a huge ratio. You know, 104 divided by 0 is infinite, but, I mean, realistically, it's just big, right? You know, what was the largest part to that? The F-6F Hellcat during World War II, 19-to-1 kill ratio. Well, this is 104-0 against Russian, all right? And this is largely due to superior avionics and missiles, right? And this Russian shortfall is only further increased with F-35s, right? We're advancing leaps and bounds with avionics, radar detection systems, missile guidance systems, right? We're well outstripping them. Note, the only advantage of an Su-57 over an F-35 may be maneuverability and speed, right? So the Russian aircraft tend to be very maneuverable And I'm willing to bet this is a highly maneuverable plane. All right, it's a little bit faster, not as fast as an F-15. F-15s go about Mach 2.5. Right, these run about Mach 2.0. F-35s only run about Mach 1.6. Right, so this is faster, but that's the only advantage, which is minimal compared to the avionics, weapons, radar detectors, or they use infrared detectors these days, and missile guidance systems and missiles. Right, that's going to win the day. In Syria, the Su-30 SMs have not been spotted with modern air-to-air missiles. Right, Russian ground vehicles are notoriously prone to breakdown, including their tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel transports, trucks. This is compounded by a wide diversity in vehicle types, which makes logistical support of repair parts problematic. It's going to be hard to keep them running, especially in combat situations. And this threatens maneuver warfare capability and logistics capacity. In each of its last 3 wars, Russia suffered logistical problems, causing shortages of ammunition, food, fuel, and repair parts. Vulnerable to hit-and-run guerrilla attacks. Right? Increasing vulnerability to guerrilla hit-and-run attacks. So a nation's economy is their basis of military power, and Russia has the 12th largest GDP, 13 times smaller than the U.S., right? Behind South Korea and just ahead of Australia, and it's less than half the size of California. All right, one state in our country, right? California is twice as big as Russia's economy. All right, it's got the 6th largest defense budget, well behind the U.S., right? Behind Saudi Arabia, just ahead of who's Germany, I believe. It's having problems purchasing its new ships, its new top-of-the-line aircraft, Su-57s, which are crap, right? Which are failing, and T-14 Armada tanks, right? It's new tanks, barely buy any, right? They only have 2 Su-57s. One's crashed already. 76 are on order to be acquired by 2020. We'll see if that comes through. All right. Now, compare that with F-35s, and only F-35s. Right. There's 595 F-35s built by the U.S. owned. All right. U.S. has this many, with 2,456 more on order. Compare that with 76. Right. Plus, there's 14 other countries buying F-35s, and most of them are NATO countries. All the highlighted ones, these are NATO countries. All right. So you have Great Britain, Italy, Netherlands, Australia, Norway. Australia is not NATO. Okay. Norway, Denmark, Canada, Turkey, Poland, Belgium, Israel, Japan, South Korea, Singapore. All right. Grand total for these is 831. The total altogether with the United States is 3,287. All right. Now, if you compare NATO's part of that. So Russia has 76 Su-50. NATO has, or is going to have, 3,098 F-35s. So Russia has 76 on order. These are the ones in order for F-35s. That's a 41-to-1 ratio. For every one of their crap Su-57s, which don't work in stealth, have crappy avionics, there's going to be 41 F-35s. Now that doesn't include F-22s. That doesn't include F-15s. There's F-15s all around the world. There's F-16s all around the world. The greatest current export aircraft now is F-16. I'm pretty sure. As far as current sales, right? That's the hot aircraft. I mean, there's a lot of old MiG-21s out there. They are exported quite a bit. But as far as current sales, the hottest aircraft is F-16, right? Another American aircraft being sold around the world. All right. So that's just a sample of Russia's military capacity, right? We said there's two things: there's human resource and material resource. Well, they're hurting here in all these areas. Now, 99.999% of the masses will retain none of this. They'll know none of this. All they'll know is a mocking joke, right? He's a fool, ho ho ho. All right, and that's going to be the reality, the sum total of reality. Shift all focus off the facts and intelligent analysis, right? And it works every time. Just watch it work again.